When I saw the unveiling of this gorgeous SJE093, I love the fact that it rhymes. Don't even ask me what the reference number is about. I will never understand Seiko references. First thing I thought was, yes, we can finally appreciate the 6.2 MAS again. We have a reissue of a reissue that we can get to enjoy the second time around. It's fantastic. And if you know me well enough, you know that I love the original from any brand, no matter the name. It's that origin story that I love. It's my bread and butter. But then looking at the fine print, no Grand Seiko based caliber, not even a high beat movement for that price. And then coming to the realization that this very watch epitomizes the problem that affects Seiko. From a price, from a movement standpoint, from a finishing and detail perspective, all the small nuances that make up this watch, but ultimately leaves most of us flat. So there's a reason why this is a controversial watch, and there's definitely a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. Seiko has a problem, and it's not something that I think will ever go away. As the years have gone by, so their prices have climbed. So much so that under the new Prospex line, a lot of the prices of their pieces have doubled. One positive that's come from this price increase is that their quality control has improved. So you might be lucky enough to get a chapter ring that's aligned or a bezel insert that lines up properly. You know, small things. Now sure, we can say that the build quality of their watches are pretty fantastic, and far better than what you can find from rival companies that charge maybe 3 times the price for similar. But the one thing that Seiko is most famous for, and it's independent of the price, it's a universal constant, their movement accuracy sucks. And I think we sometimes use the term Seiko lottery when buying one of their watches, hoping that the movements will be somewhat within standards and, consistent. It's always a pleasant surprise when you receive a Seiko that has 0 faults, apart from the fact that the movement accuracy is all over the place. This is not a criticism on their movements. They are built like tanks. They can take more punishment than most Swiss movements and keep on going. But no matter the price point, Seiko just seems to outright refuse to regulate their watches when they are being assembled. We'll talk about more of that later. Now, one of the true icons and best designed dive watches in the world is the 6.2 MAS. Now, we don't have to debate on the whole Blancpain Bathyscaphe ownership story and the fact that Seiko just pretty much took the design and copied it wholesale. I think we'll agree that the 6.2 MAS did it better. And Seiko have produced many re-editions in recent years. 3 of the most important in this group, the SLA017, the SLA033, and the SLA039. These were the ones that really got the ball rolling. And with these high-spec watches, they were equipped with the 8L35 movement, based on a Grand Seiko caliber. Down the road, they gave us models like the SLA037 with a high-beat Grand Seiko-based caliber. And still, if we're talking from a movement accuracy standpoint, wild deviations. But then the great thing that came out of this development was that they gave us the original designs as well as spin-offs, more affordable options of those original designs too. Bearing in mind that many of these Prospex models especially, they're not as affordable as Seiko 5s, which have shot up in price too. But they do come equipped with a lot of improvements, especially in that quality control segment. And these are built solid, they're built tough, they have a great color palette. Such a diverse range of pieces to choose from, all in that $1,000 category. And under the Seiko 5 and the Prospex collection, this entirely new modern range have been the most successful for the Seiko brand. Out of nowhere, Seiko then gives us the SJE093, telling us that around August we're going to see these watches produced again. 1,965 examples, obviously calling back to the 1965 original. From a design standpoint, the 6.2 MAS, in that time of 1965, we hadn't reached the 1970s yet, where cases were blown up in size, where the watches were getting a bit more dynamic with their colors. They looked a little bit of that time. The mid to late 60s, we saw designs that were still quite linked to the 1950s, but were starting to experiment and to be more adventurous. And of course, as we know, this is when the skin diver design really became popular. I look at the case architecture of this watch, the very squared off, almost tonneau design. The proportions on the dial, the allocated space given to all the applied plots, the handset, how the typeface has been so nicely arranged. The applied frame around the date window, that slim, fully graduated, almost captive bezel insert that surrounds the dial. The color, from a black bezel to a slate grey dial, how that blends with the steel case. It's a very rare thing to find on a watch these days, where there is this dress quality, a sense of neatness, but also a lot of practicality and function, paired with a design that is aesthetically beautiful. That's what I think the 6.2 MAS does so brilliantly, and Seiko brings all of this to the table. So when you delve into the specs of the SJE093, you see that the watch is no longer 40mm, it's now more period correct, 38mm. It's shaved a whole 0.5 millimeter off its case thickness, it's now 12.5mm. As all of us know, it has amazing lume, it has 200 meters water resistance, and with this new caliber it has better shock resistance. But here's the thing. When you get even further down into it, you see that it's using a 6L37 movement instead of what I believe to be an 8L35 that was in the original SLA017. Those earlier models used movements that were handed down by Grand Seiko. This movement has a 45-hour power reserve, which is quite low. And then you look at its accuracy, all over the place. +10, -10, in and around that ballpark. Apparently that's the new standard they're following. And bear in mind, we're not talking about a $1,000 entry-level Prospex watch here. This is more along the lines of $3,500. This is top of the pile. This is supposed to be the epitome. Honestly, this is one of the most bizarre juxtapositions in our watch industry. A true icon as a dive watch, but does not have the movement to match, but is still requesting a very high price. A price that we would believe would at least fall under chronometer standards. When you're paying $3,000 for a watch, you would expect it to be at least accurate, within a well-established chronometer specification. And what blows me away is that Grand Seiko it's just over the road. And with their watches, no matter the price, accuracy is everything with what they do. How is there such a divide between these two names, even still, today? Now look, this is not the end of the world. With any watch that you receive and the accuracy is off, you can always take it to a third-party watchmaker and they can regulate it within 5 minutes, you know? But I think it's more the principle of the matter, where Seiko goes to such length to create a one-to-one recreation of their most important dive watch that single-handedly drove the direction of the Willard, the Marine Master, the Tuner. You would expect that all the care and the attention to detail that goes into all the most important parts on the outside would also reflect on the inside. But here's the thing, the common criticism I'm hearing is that you can buy a Black Bay for this sort of money and get a watch that's far more accurate, and I would agree. But we're talking about the 62 MAS here. This is not an off-brand watch. This is not a derivative. This is a Seiko-made product. This is a Seiko original. And I can see that the enthusiast like me who loves the original will appreciate this watch so much no matter the price. And that's what Seiko themselves know. A 38mm recreation of the original watch on a rubber strap with a movement that deserves to be far better, and I will say should have Grand Seiko's stamp of approval on it. A watch itself that should be held to far higher standards, but does not have that movement accuracy to match it. I've just made this thought up, that Seiko is one brand that is so consistent at being inconsistent when it comes to their movement accuracy. Now hey, you might pick up one that is perfect, running at +0 seconds a day, but it's more likely going to be +28, -37, in that sort of ballpark. I've really liked this watch a lot from the very beginning, and it's sort of a dream to have the 62 MAS in the collection. I really appreciate the levels they've gone to make this watch as faithful to the original as possible. But today the modern standard of timekeeping should be factored in. I mean, this is the reason why we buy these fantastic watches. We generally like it to be on time. And to this day, where modern watchmaking has become so advanced, and just a few doors down, Seiko has that accessibility of one of the greatest watch manufacturers in the world to rely on. But their movement accuracy standards still remain underwhelmingly low.